Hey everybody, video number 5 here. This is Kurt Nelson's YouTube channel. Thanks for coming back, and hope we're learning together here. We just talked about some hip rotation stuff. We're going to talk bat path in this video here. And bat path, there's a lot of videos there that come out over bat path. There's a gazillion drills out there. There's so many different thoughts. There's the feel versus real stuff. It's ultimately what we think we do oftentimes is not exactly what we do. Sometimes it's close for some, other times it's very far away for others. You know, I think a lot of the old school bat path stuff, you know, that started coming out probably in the late 80s, you know, early 90s, you know, it might even been before that. I don't know the answer to that, but you know, ultimately they started seeing a lot of hitters losing the barrel and, you know, swinging up too much and flying out and whiffing underneath pitches. So what was being taught then was a very like swing down to the ball, take the shortest route possible, you know, kind of chop like kind of fact in terms of like trying to create that backspin, and that kind of mindset, you know, worked for some. It did. Like, you got plenty of guys that will show you, hey, I'm just taking that shortest path to the ball, and then when you actually see their actual swing, it looks nothing like that, right? So that's where a feel for them produced a different reel or a different result, right? And that works. So like for some hitters, they think about that natural short path to the ball, and all of a sudden it turns into a really good swing. And then other guys that get over-taught that, like I did when I was younger to a certain degree, like that creates us on-off swing. That doesn't allow us to stay behind and through the ball long enough to have more forgiveness. Now we're talking about hitting the ball out in front. Like, we don't want to hit the ball behind us. You know, so we'll get into the misconception of hitting the ball deep, because I think that hitting the ball deep is completely something that that is over-taught in different ways as well, and we'll get to that eventually. But right now, we're just talking about the natural, simple, you know, bat path is ultimately hitting behind the ball, right? As we're really trying to hit from behind the baseball. Now, granted, there's plenty of swings out there that get way too long, are slow, they're inefficient. You have to start your swing too early to make good decisions, and you're super susceptible to velocity, to, you know, a lot of off-speed pitches and whatnot. So when we have to cheat that much, there's probably an issue there as well. So, you know, ultimately we want to make sure that our barrel is getting on plane, you know, deep-ish. It's not going to be hitting the ball back here, and we don't want to have a long, slow swing. I still believe, especially dealing with young hitters, that the idea of having a short and compact swing has a lot of value to it. But there's a big difference to me between short and compact, where I'm ahead of my backside, I'm ahead of my what we call posterior chain, and I'm very steep on the ball right here, versus a swing that might be compact and short, but I'm still with that posterior chain, and that barrel kind of planes out behind that ball, somewhere out in front of that, you know, out in front of my front foot, or relative to the front foot, depending on location of pitch and timing, and obviously your levers. But ultimately, that bat path stuff, to me, the whole short to the ball concept, you know, it can work for some and it can really hurt others. I think it just depends on what that hitter's doing. And in a nutshell, we're really just trying to hit from behind the ball and through the ball, giving ourselves more of an opportunity to hit that ball hard, even when I'm a little bit late or a little bit early. You know, we talk about that forgiveness, is that when we're perfect, doesn't matter what your mechanics are, when you're perfect and you're right on, your results are, you know, relatively good to a certain degree, depending. But you know, we know what that's like. We know, oh, that's that back net, back corner, you know, double in the gap, or, you know, we always call them a cage bomb or whatever, you know. But that's when you're right. What happens when you're wrong? What happens when you're fooled? Or what happens when you're a little bit early? Or what happens when you're a little bit late? That, to me, is the more important side of things, because timing in the game of baseball is extremely hard. Is that if we knew, like, the secret sauce to teaching timing, is that I'd make $1 gazillion selling that, right? Because the timing, to me, is always going to be the number one thing. Is that if I'm off time a little bit and the bat path allows me to still hit that ball relatively hard or on a line, I'm better off. I have a better chance of getting a hit when I'm off. My average goes up, right? And I'll be more consistent by nature. And then at the same time, it allows us to drive the ball that much more naturally, because we start talking about the palm up, palm down positioning. And granted, there's, you know, weak positions here. I'm like hitting the ball out in front, but I'm not hitting it deep. Like I said, we'll talk more about that. But if I'm working and I'm hitting a baseball palm up, palm down here in a strong position, the odds of that ball coming off the bat harder go way up, right? So by nature, we're trying to get into palm up, palm down, and then run through the zone. We talk a lot about north to south, as you want to be hitting through the pitcher through the pitch. And sometimes the different pitch angles and different locations might change what actually north to south is. And that has to do with core rotation and hip rotation, like we talked about earlier, the ability to transfer energy through that ball, where it's coming from. But ultimately in the bat path stuff, we're really trying to figure out that feel versus real. What does the hitter think in relationship to what do they do? What do they think they do? And then what do they actually do? And then now you're going to have a better understanding of how to actually work on their bat path. Well, hey coach, I think I'm taking a really short path to the ball here, and all of a sudden they're leaking and super long and swinging up all the time here. Well, when you can show them that on video and you can say, hey, look, well, you think you're doing this and you're doing the complete opposite of this, you know, then that feel versus real is not translating, right? You know, and all of a sudden you got a guy that's showing you the same thing. I think I'm taking the shortest path possible, and next thing you know, it's boom, and he smashes a ball with a great looking swing. And you're like, okay, like that's your thought. Stick with that thought. Don't overdo it. Just stick with your thought. And it's obviously producing a good path, right? So we kind of have to help that hitter understand what they're thinking in relationship to what they're actually creating and doing. And video is always going to be something that'll really help with that. So overall, figure out that hitter individually and go from there. All right, guys. Till the next one.